Okay, well, welcome to the latest episode of Leading at Local Level with me, Tim, and my good friend John. How you doing, John?
Hey Tim, yeah, I'm good, thank you. Good to be with you again.
Good. How's life as a father of a what is it, 5-month-old baby now?
Yeah, be about 4 months now. Yeah, it's good. Getting used to a few more sleepless nights again, but hopefully that'll be over soon. But yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. I get lots of attention, lots of smiles. So what's not to like?
That was what you said to me earlier, John. You said you've barely slept for months. That's what you said.
Yeah, well, that's the flip side.
Yes, indeed. But you're good. Heidi's well, is she?
Yeah, she's well, thank you. Yeah.
Good, excellent, good stuff. Right, so we are going to be starting a new series, aren't we, John? A new podcast series, and we want to do it on a subject which is something that we've kind of made up. Well, not made up, but we have kind of made it up based on our experience, some reading we've done, some thinking we've done, and lots of talking we've been doing over the past 6 months or so. And it's this whole subject of people wisdom, what we're calling being wise in how you handle people and deal with people. And so I suppose, this is something that's quite dear to us, John, isn't it? It's something we've been talking a lot about.
It is, and I'm really excited to talk about it. And I know as we start off, it's like, what we're talking about. But I tell you what, I've found this to be really helpful, just as I've thought about, a lot of painful times in my life of trying to lead various things and just reflecting back and thinking, where are the times I struggled and why that might be. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation, to be honest.
Yeah. And so really, this was our, I suppose, if we share with you our process. So our process was this. Why is it that you get some leaders who are really gifted and competent leaders? They're people of integrity, they are good people, kind people, but somehow there's a disconnect between their leadership and their personality, their leadership, and then people actually kind of moving with them and having a sense of momentum. And it's things like, we look at some leaders, don't we, John? And you think, like, how is it you've managed to create a really healthy team? Like, we've worked with them, haven't we? Like leaders that you think, like, you're a good leader and I can follow you, but I don't particularly enjoy working here. It isn't something that I particularly feel that committed to. Or you can have other people that you just, you think, it's, I guess it's sort of, they advance quickly and everyone loves them and they make progress. And other people, you think you're just as technically gifted, but somehow you're not able to kind of move up in leadership. Does that explain it? Do you think that problem that we've encountered, John? Do you want to give us an example?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, it can be a real frustration. Like, first and foremost, for me personally, so it's not like, I've got it all sorted, but like definitely for me personally, where I've experienced some of that. But then also as I look around at others, like often, sometimes like good friends, people that I really like them, as you said, like they're great people. And then just the sadness of seeing something happen that just seems to derail them, that they were unaware of. And that's why we're addressing this. Because it's like, well, what is going on? How can we actually avoid that pitfall? And I think we're going to unpack a lot of stuff, aren't we, around that, which hopefully will be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So John, give us an example. Give us an example of a team you've worked in, like a very tangible example.
Okay, I'll give you an example, and it's going to be slightly anonymized before you all go and try and work out who this is. Okay, so I work with a guy called Brian, a really visionary Brian. Yeah, we like Brian, visionary leader, right? And he, oh man, so many ideas. He would share them. This was in a kind of a parachurch sort of setting, and he put in place over a couple of years all these new initiatives. Great guy. Like really good initiatives, really knew what he was doing. But the team around him found it a bit more difficult. They didn't feel that Brian always listened to them. And it was kind of approached those early stages of COVID, sort of a few months in, and all these new initiatives were kind of being proposed. But there was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of people were feeling quite, like, hang on, we're in a pandemic. There's a lot of financial uncertainty. The board are giving advice. He's not taking that advice. And then after a few months, Brian's number two, which wasn't me, but Brian's number two leaves the organization.
Right.
And it was really sad just for him because he was just confused. He was like, he said to me, I haven't even sensed, I didn't even know there was a problem. This had come out of the blue. And I remember thinking to myself, really? I mean, I think a lot of us have seen that was definitely coming, but he hadn't seemed to. So that's an example of a situation where a really gifted, godly guy, but just didn't seem to be aware of what his actions were having on other people and how other people were feeling. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it is very helpful, and I think a lot of people could probably resonate with leaders like that, and to differing degrees, isn't it? Is that often there's this disconnect. I suppose that's the word we keep using. Why is there this disconnect between kind of gifting and character, and then somehow engagement? And John, I've even come up with, look, we're using a new piece of software to record these podcasts, so we'll see if it's any good. But I've even come up with some little pictures. So if I can find this picture.
This is new for us.
We haven't quite worked out. It's just going to slap across the middle of our face, and we apologise. But basically, like and if you're listening to the audio version, you'll have to check this bit out online. But but often what happens, I think we have this kind of mindset, don't we, that basically a leader plus a great plan will equal people being super engaged. You know what I mean? And that's so often the way that leadership works, isn't it? If I'm a really good leader and I'm a good guy and people love me, and if I've got a really good idea, then people will definitely engage. And in reality, like quite often that just doesn't work, does it, John? Somehow like that doesn't seem to be, I suppose. And I think that's the reality that we've been sort of thinking through over the last kind of couple of years, is that just doesn't work. Like I've done all the leadership training and all that kind of stuff, but there's this thing that seems to, this disconnect that seems to create this problem, and it doesn't work out very well. And so what we're sort of proposing or thinking through is thinking it a little bit more like this, which is actually, it's really about the leader and their ability to do people wisdom well, that will ultimately lead to not only will lead to developing a great plan, because you're doing it with people rather than on your own. That's one part of the process, but also that whatever the plan is, actually people are properly engaged. And I think it's really this middle bit for us. So we see that as almost like a middle thing between the leader and the plan. It's actually how you handle people in the middle of it that, to be honest, to me seems to make the difference. And so that's what we're trying to address, isn't it?
And just to say, we don't get trained on that. So this is the kind of thing where, I don't know about you listening and you're thinking, yeah, that may ring true, but I've never been trained how to do that. And we send great people to Bible college, and I mean, I've been to Bible college. You get great training. You kind of get good information. You might be able to come out and lead a small group really well, or do a presentation really well. Obviously godliness, we don't want to underplay that, and we'll get to that. But godliness as Christian leaders, our servant-heartedness, our walk with God, I mean, those things are like really important. Take that away, then you're nowhere. Okay, so we're not sort of saying that this is on a par, if you like, even with that. But I've just seen so many times people go and think, I've got trained, I walk with God, and then it's this area, this people wisdom area we're talking about, that we're just not taught in any setting of how to do it well. But the good news is, before we kind of depress ourselves and everyone else, the good news is we can learn, we can get better, and we can change, and that's what we're going to be looking at. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fair to say that I think the bar for leadership is higher now than it's ever been, particularly in churches or in parachurch organisations. Maybe if you're in the military, it's a little bit different. But even in the military now, I suppose what would have traditionally happened is there was much greater kind of emphasis, I guess, on corporate responsibility, like collective responsibility, maybe in the past, post-war generations, pre-war generations. You found your place as a sum of some of a kind of greater part, as it were, or the bigger machine. And I think our culture has shifted significantly, and really now it's all about individual actualization, isn't it? It's about me and what my career path and where I'm going to go. And if you read studies now, there's been a significant change in the number of jobs, for example, that that young people will have in their lifetime. Previously it would have been you'd have been one or two jobs your entire life. You're stuck with a company, whereas now people are sticking in a job 2 years, maybe 3 years at the most, and then moving on for career progression. And so when you're leading people now, your ability to handle people and really and to meet, in a sense, their needs and what they're expecting and what they're looking for is now, that requirement is so high, and that's actually really, really difficult, I think. And let's be clear, in the church, we're not encouraging leaders to just sort of see their job as individually actualizing each of their church members, but you just have to recognize that that's just so part of our culture, that's how people are processing. They're not saying, I come to church and the vicar is a bit grumpy and a little bit odd, but he preaches great sermons and we do some good activities. That's not enough now. Like it's like, how are you connecting with me? And I want to feel part of what you're doing, and I want to feel engaged. And
Absolutely.
And I think that just is so difficult for leaders now. And I think we need to be not too hard on ourselves, really, and recognise how hard it is.
It is challenging. And there's a generational change as well. So, I mean, whereas even 10, 20 years ago, positional leadership, because you've got a position, like, you're the pastor or you're the CEO, whatever it is, like, then we'll follow you because you've got the position, right? You must know what to do. Well, we'll just do as you say. That's totally changed now. And it's partly generational, I think. Yeah. But now leadership is genuinely about influence. People won't just follow someone because of their position. And there are pros and cons to that. And we can talk about that some other time. As you say, that's where we are. We've got to deal with where people are at and lead them well, and recognizing those changes in culture and in the atmosphere that we lead in is really key. So I think that's really good. I mean, Tim, do you want to? Is there another example that you've got? Because I've talked about Brian. Have you got an example that you've seen?
Yeah, so I've got a leader that I worked with once a long time ago. Wasn't in a Christian setting, and he was a fantastic leader. Like, he was fantastic, and just a really high performing individual. And actually, I had to be honest, certainly for a while, had a really great time working for him. But he was superly driven. And so, like, if you were working, you'd get emails all evening. Like, he was on your case all the time. Like, very high expectations about performance and about what people were delivering. But he wasn't actually very good at this whole people thing. And so what happened over time is that we just got a bit burned out, basically, because it was relentless and he just wouldn't stop. And people felt under pressure to be something and to perform and to be, to meet this expectation. And actually, after a while, it just exhausted people, really. And it was just a shame because, all those people, we did do well. It was a good team. It was a high performing team. I'm not knocking him, but I think, I just think he could have led more effectively. And I think, like, that was in a work context. But if you're like that in a church context, people don't have to be there. And so they're not. Like, you have to put up with it when you're being paid to do it in the same way. Not quite, but, you still, you have to go on with it. But in a church context or in a voluntary context, people are just going to go, like, if it's CMF, you're like that, people are just go, oh, do you know what? I can't, it's too much. I've got other stuff going on. So for me, that was an example where this guy was super driven, and it just exhausted people. He wasn't aware of how people were feeling, I think,
Yeah. No, that's a really helpful example, actually. And it's helpful to see as in the workplace. This is not just related to church, but as you say, there's particular challenges. But I think we're working with volunteers, but in the workplace as well, this impacts a lot of us in all these settings. I mean, can I give an example of someone in church?
Go for it.
Yeah. So this was from a long time ago, but a small group that I was in, and we had a brilliant leader. Sarah, right? And she was great at leading Bible studies. I mean, like, really good, really generous. Like, she'd follow up with lots of encouragement. We'd have it's before the days of WhatsApp, but you get a message just to encourage you with a verse and so on, and to remind you to read the passage before you came. It was that was the kind of setting we were in. But she was so good that she struggled to let others lead. So we're in a small group and this was a kind of students. And there were times where, again, she was so good that, when people didn't get it quickly, when they weren't really sort of getting the link between the passage or the concept, that you could actually just see visibly she'd get frustrated and kind of quite short with people. And I remember it's a bit awkward, isn't it? And one evening it got so bad that she got really frustrated with somebody. I can't remember the details. She got really frustrated. And one person, they walked out. They walked out. They couldn't take it in tears, And that just came back to me as we were preparing this. I was thinking, again, it's such a shame where there was so much potential there for her and her leadership. And it was just seemed to be sabotaged by her inability to, just to kind of manage her the way she was feeling and just kind of keep that in sometimes. Anyway. Yeah. So there you go. So that's another example. I mean, I wonder if it's good, Tim, if we get into the model, and if you want to sort of introduce the model of that's going to kind of take us further on.
Yeah, I think we're approaching this from a wisdom point of view, aren't we, John? So, like, we've called it people wisdom because really the Bible talks a lot about wisdom, and I think often handling people, there's not black and white rules. It's not, there's not a law about how Sarah should handle that Bible study, or how Brian should have handled his situation. There isn't. You need to learn wisdom, and wisdom is something, as we see in the Proverbs, don't we, that again and again they're encouraged to pursue wisdom. So we're just emphasizing, I guess, a specific aspect of wisdom. It's not just wisdom in general, but wisdom in terms of dealing with people. And again, in the Psalms, it talks about, you seek after knowledge and understanding, which leads to wisdom. And so that's kind of our biblical, I suppose, sort of starting point, is actually how do we seek wisdom when dealing with people, because we need it so much now as leaders, really. And so we've come up with this model. It's called People Wisdom. I'm going to try and stick it on the screen, John, if I can. Maybe we can put our heads to the answer. That way. We can still talk and be either side. And so this is our little kind of People Wisdom model. And really, I suppose we're defining it as the ability to discern emotions, interests, and abilities in yourself, and to be able to interpret that in terms of the context of what God is doing in a situation or a place, and to be able to use that kind of wisdom and that insight to be able to manage people and relationships effectively. And so for us, there are really that 5 components. That's what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks. We're going to be talking about, really, the center point is being God aware, really. And we're going to talk a whole session about what it means to be God aware in the context of people, about what God is doing in the situation, what God is doing with people. And then it's really about self-awareness. So, about being aware of what God is doing in you, and how, what your weaknesses are, what your strengths are, what your preferences are. Because if we don't know that, we're going to trip over our own feet, to be honest. Then it's about valuing people. It's about understanding people, about empathy, about hearing people, really hearing people, being able to read between the lines, being able to value them and seek the best for them. And then it gets on to managing your emotions. So, like, how well, like taking, a situation where, you get angry and frustrated about something, for example, how well do you manage your emotions? If you can't manage them well, you're not going to be people wise. People are going to get frustrated or upset with you. And then the last one is possibly the more difficult one, is that kind of, as a leader, being aware of what's going on in the situation or the moment, what's happening. How do I kind of pitch my talk to the group, my kind of what we're doing as a group. So if the group, it's things like getting a sense of, like, the group is exhausted and tired, and therefore me kind of coming out and going, right, we're going to do more. It's just not, like, again, like, as a classic example be Rehoboam, who took over from Solomon, totally was not wise in discerning the moment, the cultural moment, the situation, and again, just, undermined his leadership massively. So it's just things like that, really. So, John, do we want to just briefly talk through these things, do you think? And then we'll unpack them maybe more next time? Or should we just draw it here and then people can wait and be excited to hear it?
I mean, I think maybe let's keep it brief and keep us all hungry for more. I think that would be good. I mean, I think I just, as this may seem a bit conceptual, but I think it's really important to recognise that for some of us, maybe as we've given some examples or as we've introduced this topic, not to get too touchy-feely here, but the reality is a lot of us do carry some, like, pain, I suppose, and disappointment and hurt, and, thinking about opportunities we think we've missed in the past, and the way we may have hurt people or been hurt by others as well, in leadership kind of settings or in church settings. And I think it's just important to recognise that that's kind of what we're dealing with. These aren't just ideas, but it is about growing in wisdom and processing that. And so it'd be good, like, as you're listening to this or watching this, to maybe just jot down some examples of time, just pause and just think, where are times where I've found difficult, either in myself or with other people? What have I observed? And then as we go through over the next few weeks, hopefully there'll be things that you can then apply to those situations. It might be a very current situation. In fact, to be honest, we were just talking, weren't we, before we hit record, Tim, about, a challenging leadership issue, and it's around people and how you manage people. And so that's a lot of our process points are going to be examples, and then talking them through with somebody and processing them and praying about them. If you're a Christian, you're going to pray about those things. So.
I've been watching All Creatures Great and Small on Channel 5. Have you seen it?
Oh yes, me too.
I actually really like it. It's a good series, and a quote at the beginning, I think, Siegfried, whatever he's called, Farnham, says it's not animals that are the problem, it's people that cause all the bother. And it's, and it's true, and I think that's what, for us, what we're trying to unpick is how do you effectively manage people and lead people well. And it comes from, being aware of what God is doing, being aware of where the way you are, the way you react, the way you respond in situations, your natural biases or leanings or kind of, and being aware of other people's biases, because it's all about how do those two things fit together. John and I both like lots of the same things. It's very easy for us to get along, but it's not necessarily so easy for us to get along with some other people. And how do we get the best out of someone who's naturally quite shy, for example, and doesn't, and we'll go yes, even though they don't agree with something, and things like that. And it's just, just to finish on this, it amazes me, the more I lead, is how often people are not honest about what they're actually thinking and feeling. And leaders operate so often on the basis of, but you didn't object, or you didn't say anything, or you seem to nod your head in support, and then it's all come apart. And it's like, and that's what we're trying to, I suppose, dig into a little bit, is how do you, there's so much complexity in there around how I'm being with people, what I'm projecting, what other people are receiving, what God is doing in that moment, what the group is thinking, how my emotions are spilling over, and if we can get a hand on that, I think we can be better leaders.
And just also think to emphasize, like when we're talking about leadership, it's like leadership, but what we're talking about is serving people.
Yes,
some people said, let's abolish the term leadership and talk about servanthood, right? This is about serving people well. And so I think as we think about wisdom, as we think about growing, it's not so we kind of become this one sort of type of leader. God calls all sorts of people to lead, and he wants us to be ourselves and to bring ourselves and not shape us into John or Tim, heaven forbid. But it's about growing as servants of other people, of caring for people well, of honouring people, of honouring members of the body. And so this is all in service of that, we hope. So that's why I'm really excited about it, because I believe it's at God's heart of how he wants to move in and through us.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Good. Okay, so the next session we're going to start with God awareness. And so we'll hopefully be releasing that very soon. So look out for that. And until next time, John, thank you.
Great. Cheers, Tim. See you soon. Bye.